In hi-fi and home theater, there are good products, great ones even, but very few manage to become truly life-altering. I'm talking about the type of products that become very difficult to imagine a world where they don't exist. That's why today we're breaking down 10 AV products that changed the world. The radio. Nearly 140 years ago, Marconi invented the first radio, and while that would prove to be a paradigm shift in its own right, the first radio broadcast wouldn't happen for another 25 years. In 1920, Westinghouse transmitted the first radio broadcast, which was the results of the presidential election between Warren G. Harding and James Cox. A year later, fans were able to hear the very first sports broadcast, a baseball game between the Pirates and the Phillies. In 1938, the power of radio proved so effective that listeners were sent into a panic when they heard the radio play War of the Worlds. The radio has and continues to be part of our daily lives, and for many, a source of not only entertainment and information, but also generation-defining news. I mean, do we even need to say anything else? The record player. While purists will argue that the first record player was invented by Thomas Edison in 1877, those early designs, while similar in theory, used wax cylinders, whereas Emil Berliner's design in 1890 used flat discs, which is more in line with what we're used to today. Regardless of the inventor, the record player was the first real way that artists and musicians could bring their performances to the masses. As the format progressed, it also allowed artists to mass-produce their music rather than have to sing it live each and every time a cylinder or record was cut. I mean, can you even imagine having to do that? The record player and later vinyl records birthed a hobby for millions, as well as cemented an industry we now know as the music business. The Walkman. If you ask people who, or better yet, what company invented the Walkman, most people will say Sony. All intents and purposes, they'd be right, though it can be argued that the genesis for the Walkman, then called the stereo belt, actually belongs to a Brazilian inventor, Andreas Pavel. But as things often go, Pavel lost his suit against Sony, resulting in Sony being credited with the Walkman in 1979. While Sony was optimistic about the Walkman, initial sales of the portable audio device crushed expectations, selling more than 30,000 units in the first 2 months, with each unit going for around $150. From 1979 to 2010, when production of the Walkman officially stopped, Sony had sold by their numbers 200 million Walkmans. This success no doubt led to other portable music devices. The CD player. Speaking of portable music, in 1982, hot on the heels of the Walkman, Sony released what is largely believed to be the first CD player, the CDP-101, for, at the time, a pants-wetting sale price of $730. Initially only released in Japan because Philips, who co-developed the CD format with Sony, couldn't meet their launch date for their player, the CD-100. And this error in timing resulted in the consumer CD player officially being launched globally in March of 1983, and with it, the beginning of the digital music era. The iPod. Arguably the most well-known and successful portable music player next to the Walkman is the iPod. Actually, if you go by sheer sales figures, the iPod monsters the Walkman, with units sold totaling upwards of 450 million. And it's easy to think of the iPod as the first portable music or MP3 player, but it's not. Not even close. The first portable MP3 player was the MP-Man F10, released in 1997, 4 years before the iPod. But the iPod makes this list because I doubt many of you have ever heard of the F10. But I defy you to find a man, woman, or child alive in the early 2000s that didn't have an iPod. The iPod not only changed how we listened to and interacted with our favorite music, it helped to change the music business on the whole. Heck, it even changed the audiophile hobby as we know it, something a lot of you were very much against in the beginning, and some of you still are now. For better or worse, the iPod took hold, and it can be argued that neither music playback nor the industry itself has ever been the same. The television. Now, the history of the television is a long and complicated one because there were more than a few people and inventors, many of whom were completely unrelated to one another, working on this idea of transmitting images through the air using existing radio systems. In an attempt to avoid semantic arguments, I mean, that's what the comments are for, right? Let's agree that next to the radio, no singular piece of AV tech has done more to completely transform the landscape of human civilization like the television. Television not only brought the world together decades before the internet, it also propelled the advancement of other technologies and entertainment. It's because of the popularity of television, cinema, and Hollywood, they had to evolve and better itself to lure viewers out of their homes and back to theaters. Sound familiar? The television may also hold the distinction of being the most ubiquitous piece of tech ever invented. It is estimated that 79% of households the world over have more than one TV in their home, with 69% owning at least one. You still think projectors are the future? VHS. The first format war wasn't between Blu-ray and HD DVD. It was actually between Betamax and VHS. And like with Blu-ray, the lesser format VHS won and ushered in a new era of home entertainment. VHS, along with the proliferation of televisions, paved the way for a new type of enthusiast and collector, the videophile. Prior to being able to rent and later purchase your favorite films, you had to wait for them to air on broadcast TV. But VHS's biggest win may have been its ability to record, allowing consumers to save their favorite shows and movies and create their own sort of box sets or complete seasons long before such an idea existed at the studio level. Now, whether you believe VHS to be the better format or not, one cannot argue that of all the video formats, only one has managed to rival the popularity of VHS. And while DVD may have eventually surpassed tape in terms of sales, it never would have existed if not for VHS. Napster. I don't know if there has been a bigger disruptor to an entire industry than Napster. Practically overnight, Napster and other services like LimeWire changed the face of not only music, but pop culture, allowing users to effectively pirate, aka steal, music en masse to such a degree that it became virtually impossible to prosecute, thus forcing the music industry and its decades-old model to change radically. While Napster may have been relatively short-lived for the sea change it brought about, you can bet your ass that it is because of Napster that you now have streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music, to name a few. While Napster may not have ultimately destroyed the music industry or physical media, it did enough damage that neither were the same after. Dolby surround sound. I could easily do an entire video on all of the different iterations of Dolby surround sound because every few years it seems to evolve. So I'm including it on this list because no other surround format, not even DTS, has managed to become part of our daily lives the way Dolby Surround, ProLogic, PL2, Digital, True HD, or Atmos have. And it's because of Dolby that we not only have come to enjoy surround sound at the theatrical level, but more importantly, in our homes. And Dolby's technology has been so prolific and so influential that it's now arguably a standard in its own right and part of our television, movie, and music landscape. YouTube. I went back and forth about which service deserves the final slot on this list, Netflix, iTunes, or YouTube. And I ultimately chose YouTube because of the three, I feel that YouTube has done more to democratize one's personal entertainment in ways Netflix and iTunes did in the beginning, but haven't so much as of late. YouTube isn't perfect, but it is a legitimate entertainment and distribution platform, arguably the granddaddy and best of them all. It has altered not only how we consume content on virtually every level, but more importantly, it's changed who gets to create the content. As a filmmaker whose career predated YouTube by only a few years, I cannot begin to describe to you what a platform like YouTube could have done for someone like me and my team all those years ago. I could legit make an argument that next to the radio, YouTube may go down in history as being one of the most influential tech platforms or products ever. So that's it. That is my list of 10 AV products that changed the world, but I don't think I'm going to get out of here scot-free because I'm sure you found one or two that I've left off. So what have you?
Well, I have a few. I think your list was really good.
Yes.
I agree with everything on your list. There was one that you mentioned, but that didn't make your official list.
Okay.
And that's Netflix.
Okay. Yeah.
that I feel really does deserve to be
On the list.
on the list. Back in the early days of Netflix, starting with the discs. Remember those red envelopes?
Oh, yeah.
That was always so exciting.
Oh, yeah. The queue.
The queue, yeah.
The queue, where you'd be like, what's next?
You could only have like 2 at a time.
Yeah.
How ridiculous is
Did
that?
you ever share your queue with people? Like in an office setting?
No. I mean, I did have in a prior relationship, we shared a Netflix account.
Sure.
And so we each had our own queue,
Ooh, spicy.
which probably is why we're not together anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Don't let your disc touch my discs.
yeah, your selection sucked. Anyway, that was so much fun. To its now current state, having an almost endless supply of content at your fingertips. In my opinion, I feel that Netflix likely changed much of how we consume our content today.
Yeah.
I think that they, and I could be wrong, but I feel like Netflix brought about cord cutting. People who dumped their cable providers.
Yeah.
Which led to more and more networks creating their own apps. I mean, okay, that part might not be so great because it kind of feels like we're on our way back to cable.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just a la carting it to the tune of hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, even coined a whole idea of Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
It really did, I think, shift the way we access media in terms of TV and movies.
Yeah. No, I mean, Netflix, it's odd. It's funny when you look at Netflix and the paradigm shift that it has brought about in not only distribution but home entertainment, and think about how the founder really wanted to sell it.
Oh, right.
He tried to sell it to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster laughed him out of the room and said there's no future in this. And so that's what ultimately made them go full steam ahead with all of their plans, because they actually were overwhelmed with the mail system and wanted to ditch it and just go do other things. So that's funny. Netflix in the beginning, because especially with the streaming era, they understood that they needed more and more content. And when they launched their streaming service, which they did very, very quietly, by the way, I know it's hard to think of Netflix streaming nowadays as something that isn't the primary focus. But believe it or not, the streaming service launched not that long after the boom popularity of their DVD mailing service. It's just not a lot of people opted to use it.
Oh, I know. I was wicked against it in the beginning.
Yeah.
I actually remember getting an email, I think on my phone, in the middle of the night. Imagine that, me not sleeping.
Yeah.
From Netflix, talking about how they were going to be changing the way, they delivered the movies, and like they were going to go have this streaming option.
Yeah.
And I was so against it.
A lot of people were. And in 2009, when I was negotiating distribution contracts for my first film, Netflix was really smart because we had a contract with Netflix to distribute the film on DVD through the little red envelopes. And they picked up, I want to say they picked up 2,000 units, which at that time was not a big order, but we were an independent film. But part of our agreement with them is that we had to give them streaming rights to the film for, I think, 5 or 7 years. And as I understand it, that was kind of a gimme that even the studios weren't taking seriously, which is why in the early days of streaming, Netflix had everything. Because the studios wanted there to be DVDs, but they didn't have the foresight to even think about streaming. And so that's how, for the longest time, Netflix was the only service you ever needed. Now, once that 5 and 7 year period, once those were all up, the studios were like the seagulls in Finding Nemo, and they're like, mine, and that's why, and that's when Netflix started to make their own content, because all of these titles, these blue chip titles, were coming off their platform because some lawyer somewhere wised up and went, hey,
We're missing out.
We're losing money,
Yeah.
big time. And that is what spawned the just explosion of apps and platforms everywhere. And so even in subterfuge, Netflix changed the game. You know what I mean? So it does deserve to be on the list, and this list could easily, I think, stretched out to like 20 products.
I can't wait to hear what other people watching, because I'm sure there's things that we've forgotten about or left off. Now, I feel like that's the biggest one.
The biggest one? Okay.
I have a couple more.
Okay.
Next up for me is the DVR.
Like TiVo.
The digital video recorder, which the first working prototype was created in 1998 by the Stanford Science Department, which eventually led to services like TiVo and later actual, consumer DVRs then came out. But I mean, imagine like there were no more, VHS tapes to change. To me, it was game changing, making it utterly simple to watch whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted.
Yep.
And I have to imagine that DVR, on some level, influenced streaming as we know it today.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, it definitely gave us on demand, where in an attempt to circumvent, I think, TiVo's commercial skip functionality, networks started offering through digital cable on demand, where you didn't have to TiVo it anymore. You didn't have to save it. We're going to keep 6-7 episodes, on our servers, like in the background, that you're going to access through your DirecTV and whatnot, and you're going to be able to watch those commercial free, albeit after you watch 90 seconds of commercials before you let it play. But yeah, no, TiVo, kind of like Xerox, where it just became synonymous or ubiquitous as a term for DVR, whether you had TiVo or you didn't. I never had TiVo.
I TiVo'd it.
Yeah, I TiVo'd it. Even when I just had like AT&T DVR, I'd still tell friends like, oh, I got it on TiVo, So, okay, DVR.
Okay. So this next one, it's a little bit more nostalgia for me, and that is the cassette tape. Which was invented by Lou Ottens and his team at Philips in 1963.
Okay.
You might even say that this paved the way for truly portable music. But for me, more importantly, it spawned the mixtape. I mean, entire friendships and relationships were built around mixtapes.
Mixtapes, mixed CDs, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember calling up the radio station to request a song and then waiting all night to tape record it off your boombox? I mean, those were the days.
I remember, yeah. You wanted to impress a girl, you'd figure out like what her favorite song was, then you call a radio station, and then you'd like figure out like, because you couldn't call her because that'd be weird, but you'd figure out like tell a friend to let her know to listen at like 7:30 or something. Yeah, no, I remember the mixtape.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a mixtape from a boy,
you're basically married.
Yeah, it was. Talk about game changing. You really got to see into their soul, because whatever songs they chose was not only a reflection of them, but how maybe they felt about you. And I don't know. I just think it's such a fun time. I guess now there's playlists, but it's not quite the same. Yeah,
I think giving someone a mixtape or a mixed CD definitely is a little bit more personal than, I'm going to share my Spotify playlist with you.
Yeah.
Here's a text. Bloop.
I mean, I don't want one now, but
I have no way of playing it.
But anyway, that's it.
That's it?
It was a fun exercise.
Yeah, I think you came up with 3 good ones. So, well, that's it. That is now our 13 world-changing AV products, services, whatever. What'd you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. Question of the day, it's the easiest one in the world. What did we leave off? What would you include to this list?
And why?
And why? And
it's
why?
It's important to know why.
Yeah, and why. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to write a book, but hey, if you know the history of something that we left off, by all means, share it with us. So yeah, let's get that conversation going down below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos like this one come out so you don't miss them. If you use any of the links that Christy left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us thank you very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile. That's it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.